It was the middle of the night when I got the call. You know, those moments that seem completely out of place, the ones that make your heart skip a beat and freeze every ounce of warmth in your body. Yeah, this was one of those. It wasn't even the usual time I'd be awake, and frankly, I shouldn't have even picked up. But something inside me told me to, so I did. I'd been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. Sarah was asleep beside me, her back turned in her usual position. It had been a long, exhausting day. The world outside was still, and the only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Then, at 3:14 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced over at Sarah, who hadn't even stirred. The call was from an unknown number. My gut told me it wasn't good news. Sometimes, your instincts just know. But I couldn't ignore it. I picked up the phone and swiped the screen. "Hello," I muttered, my voice thick with sleep. There was a pause, then a deep, gravelly voice on the other end. "Eli," the voice said, sharp and cold. "It's time you know the truth." My heart jumped, and I sat up in bed. I wasn't sure what to expect, but this wasn't it. The voice didn't sound familiar, but something about it rattled me. It had an urgency to it, an edge that cut through the haze of sleep. "What truth?" I asked, my voice betraying my confusion. The voice hesitated. "You need to wake up. Your wife, she's been hiding something from you." I was fully awake now. My head was spinning, and I could feel a cold sweat forming at the back of my neck. "Who is this?" I demanded. "What are you talking about? What do you mean, hiding something?" "You'll find out soon enough. Don't trust her," the voice warned. "Don't trust anyone." Before I could even ask another question, the line went dead. I sat there in silence, holding the phone in my trembling hand, staring at the black screen as if expecting some kind of explanation to pop up. But nothing came. The call was over as quickly as it had started, leaving me in the dark, both figuratively and literally. My first thought was to wake Sarah up, to ask her what the hell that was all about. But then I stopped. What if she knew something I didn't? What if this was all some twisted prank? Was I overreacting? It wasn't like there had been any warning signs. Sarah and I had been normal, I guess. Nothing out of the ordinary. There hadn't been a fight, no sudden distance between us. I looked over at her again. She was still asleep, breathing steadily. Was I really going to wake her up in the middle of the night over a cryptic phone call from a stranger? I thought about it for a second, but my gut told me to wait. Something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it yet. I tried to calm myself down and lay back in bed. I had to be rational about this. The call could have been a mistake, or maybe someone had the wrong number. But deep down, a voice in the back of my mind kept whispering, "This isn't a coincidence." I decided to sleep on it. If I didn't hear anything more, maybe it was just my overactive imagination getting the better of me. But if something fell off when I woke up, I'd look into it. Sleep didn't come easily, though. My thoughts were racing. What if the caller was right? What if Sarah was hiding something from me? What if there was something more, something I hadn't seen before? I didn't know it then, but that phone call was only the beginning. The morning after the phone call, I woke up with a feeling that I couldn't shake, like something was lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to come to light. Sarah was still asleep beside me, her chest rising and falling softly, completely unaware of the storm brewing in my mind. I didn't know what to think, but the uncertainty gnawed at me like an itch I couldn't reach. I tried to push it out of my mind. After all, it could just be a prank, right? Maybe someone had gotten my number and thought it would be funny to mess with me. But I couldn't ignore the voice on the other end of the line. The tone, the urgency, it sounded real. And the part about not trusting anyone, that kept echoing in my head. I got out of bed quietly, trying not to wake Sarah. She had no idea what was happening inside my head, and honestly, I wasn't sure how I was going to approach her about this. But I had to do something. I couldn't just let it go. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and checked the call log. The number was no longer there. It was as if the call had never happened at all. That was strange, right? I stared at the screen, then refreshed the page a couple of times, but there was nothing. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It didn't add up. At this point, I had to know more. I had to find out if there was any truth to what the stranger had said. I wasn't sure if I could trust Sarah anymore, but there was only one way to find out. I needed to dig a little deeper. Maybe I'd find something, anything that would explain what was going on. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet, not until I had proof, or at least something concrete to go on. I decided to start with the most obvious thing. Sarah had been acting distant lately, and I'd brushed it off, thinking it was just work stress. But now, I couldn't help but wonder if that wasn't the full story. I grabbed my laptop and started going through our joint accounts, looking for any inconsistencies, anything that could shed light on what was happening. I started with our shared email. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. A few work emails, some junk, and the usual daily updates from subscription services. But then I saw it. An email from an unknown address, sent a couple of days ago. It was short, almost too short. The subject line read, "We need to talk." That was it. No name, no signature, nothing that indicated who it was from. My heart skipped a beat. I clicked on it, and my stomach dropped when I read the contents. I know what's been going on. You can't keep this a secret forever. It's time to come clean. What the hell was that supposed to mean? Who was this person? My mind raced as I clicked on the sender's email address, but it led to a dead end. It was a throwaway email address, nothing I could trace. Whoever this was, they were clearly trying to tell me something, but I couldn't make sense of it. I could feel the panic creeping in. It felt like everything was falling apart, and I wasn't even sure what was real anymore. Was Sarah hiding something from me? Had I missed the signs? What was she trying to keep from me? I stared at the email for what felt like an eternity, unsure of what to do next. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I wasn't sure how. I didn't want to accuse her without knowing the full story. I couldn't let myself get carried away with assumptions. I needed more proof. The phone call, the cryptic email, they were connected somehow. I just couldn't see the full picture yet. But something told me I was getting closer. And even though I hated it, part of me felt like I was on the edge of something huge, something that would change everything. I shut the laptop and looked back at Sarah, still asleep. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something, but I wasn't ready to blow everything up just yet. I needed to get more answers. I needed to understand what was really happening. The problem was, the deeper I dug, the more questions I had. And with each question, the more I realized that I might not like the answers. The next few days passed in a haze. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong, but I didn't know what to do with that gut feeling. I couldn't confront Sarah without sounding crazy, especially when I had no real evidence to back up my suspicions. All I had were cryptic phone calls, strange emails, and a nagging sense that the world around me was slowly unraveling. I tried to keep things normal. I went to work, we ate dinner together, and I tried to focus on small talk, anything to keep the tension at bay. But the more I tried to push everything aside, the more everything seemed to weigh on me. Sarah didn't seem different, not on the surface. She was still affectionate, still my wife, but there was an unmistakable distance between us now. It was like she was a stranger in her own skin, and I didn't know if that was me projecting my fears or if there was something real to it. One night, after Sarah had gone to bed, I sat in the living room staring at my phone, thinking about what to do next. I'd considered confronting her directly, but something held me back. I had to be smarter than that. There had to be more, something I could find, something that could either confirm my suspicions or calm my racing mind. I couldn't let this eat away at me any longer. That's when I remembered the security cameras. We'd installed them around the house a few months ago. Nothing too fancy, just a few basic cameras for peace of mind. I'd never really thought to use them, but now they seemed like my best option. It felt invasive, even creepy, but if I was ever going to get the truth, I needed to know exactly what was happening when I wasn't around. With a heavy heart, I went into the garage where the security system's hard drive was stored. It took me a while to figure out how to access the footage, but eventually, I managed to pull up the files. The most recent recordings were of the last few weeks, a time when Sarah had been acting distant, when I had started to feel that something wasn't right. I started scrolling through, skipping over the mundane footage of empty rooms and quiet corners of the house. But then I saw it. There she was, in the kitchen, talking to someone I didn't recognize. It was late at night, too late, really, and I felt a pang of unease as I saw the two of them laughing together. Sarah's laugh was genuine, a sound I hadn't heard in a while. But there was something in the way they stood too close to each other, something in the way their eyes met that made my stomach churn. The man was tall, with dark hair and a smile that I could already tell wasn't meant for me. My heart began to race as I watched, frozen, unable to look away. They talked for what seemed like hours, but the footage didn't show much more than their faces, the occasional shift in their posture, and the way Sarah reached out to touch his arm lightly. It wasn't much to go on, but in that moment, everything changed. The cold pit in my stomach grew deeper, heavier, as I realized what I was seeing. This wasn't just a casual conversation. This was something more. Something I had no right to witness. But I couldn't stop myself. I watched as their conversation drifted into more intimate territory. The way they stood so close now, the way their bodies seemed to lean toward each other. At one point, Sarah even reached up and ran her fingers through his hair. My heart thudded painfully against my chest. But then, just as quickly as it began, it ended. The man turned to leave, giving Sarah a quick kiss on the cheek before walking out the door. I didn't even need to see his face again to know exactly what had just happened. The evidence was right there, clear as day. She had been with him. I sat there, paralyzed by a mix of disbelief and rage. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I hit pause and just sat in the stillness of the room, staring at the screen. I had so many questions, so many things I needed to know, but I wasn't ready to confront Sarah yet. Not until I could be certain. This footage was only a small piece of the puzzle, but it was enough to confirm what I had feared all along. Sarah was hiding something, and it wasn't just a harmless secret. It was a betrayal. I sat there for what felt like hours, replaying the footage over and over again. I couldn't look away from the screen, even though every second felt like an eternity. My mind raced, trying to process what I had just seen. This man, whoever he was, had been in our home, in our space, laughing and touching Sarah in ways that made my blood boil. But there was still so much I didn't know. Was this the only time they had met? What was their relationship? Why was she keeping him a secret? And most importantly, was she still seeing him? The questions kept piling up, each one more urgent than the last. I couldn't sit idly by any longer, waiting for Sarah to come clean. I had to know everything. But as the reality of what I had just uncovered sank in, one thought echoed louder than the rest. I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went, or what the truth would really mean for us. But I was about to find out. The next few days were a blur of confusion and disbelief. I kept replaying the footage in my mind, each frame etching itself deeper into my thoughts. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah and that man standing together in the kitchen, laughing, touching, the intimacy between them so apparent, so raw. It gnawed at me. I couldn't escape it. I didn't want to confront her just yet, not until I had more answers. But I could feel the weight of it all slowly suffocating me, filling the space between us with an unspoken tension. I kept watching the footage over and over again, hoping for something I might have missed the first time. But each time, it was the same. That one moment where everything changed. The way Sarah had leaned in, her hand brushing against his arm. The way they stood so close. The way he kissed her cheek before leaving. It all felt like a betrayal. And that man, whoever he was, he didn't belong in our home. He didn't belong in our life. But I still didn't know the full story. The footage didn't tell me anything about how long this had been going on, or whether it was an isolated incident or part of something bigger. I needed answers. I needed to understand why this was happening. I couldn't sit idly by any longer, so I decided to take a risk. I knew it wasn't the safest route, but I couldn't get this off my mind. I needed to find out more about the man in the footage. It didn't take much to figure out his identity. There were enough clues in the footage itself. I had caught a glimpse of his car in the driveway, parked just out of sight. It wasn't the best lead, but it was enough to start. I spent the next few hours doing some online research, trying to trace any information I could find about him. He wasn't someone I recognized, but I knew his first name from their conversation. That was enough to narrow it down. It didn't take long before I found a social media profile that seemed to match him. Same name, same age, same city. His profile picture was a close-up shot of his face, smiling, almost smug in a way that made my stomach turn. It was strange, looking at this man, knowing that he had been in my house, in my life, in my space. I went through his posts, scrolling through what looked like a curated life. He posted pictures of vacations, nights out with friends, and a few selfies, nothing that stood out at first. But as I dug deeper, I saw a pattern. The more I read, the more I piece things together. He worked in the same industry as Sarah, marketing, just like her. They had met through work events, or so it seemed. But it wasn't just professional. There were messages, private ones, exchanged back and forth in the comments section. There were too many hints in the photos and posts, enough to suggest this wasn't just a one-time fling. It was something more. I closed the laptop and rubbed my face in disbelief. What had I gotten myself into? I hadn't expected this. At this point, I had no choice but to face the truth. Sarah wasn't just being distant. She wasn't just going through a phase. She was hiding something, something I wasn't prepared to handle. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to know the full extent of it anymore. But I had already come this far. There was no turning back now. The phone call, the footage, the social media, everything was starting to connect. But it still wasn't enough. I needed to hear it from her. I needed Sarah to admit it, to confess. But I couldn't do that just yet. I had to wait. I had to prepare myself for whatever came next. The following night, after dinner, I found myself sitting across from Sarah at the kitchen table. I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her with the evidence just yet. I wasn't going to accuse her without hearing her side first. But I wasn't going to let this go, either. The tension between us was unbearable. It was time to ask the question that had been plaguing me for days. I looked at her, trying to gauge if she knew anything was coming. Her eyes were tired, but she smiled softly. "How was your day?" she asked, her voice light, almost normal. It was as if she had no idea what was about to hit her. "It was fine," I said, my voice calm but controlled. "But there's something I need to ask you." Her smile faltered for a second, and I saw the slight hesitation in her eyes. "What is it?" I leaned forward, my heart hammering in my chest. This was it, the moment of reckoning. "Sarah, is there anything you're not telling me?" The room went still. Her expression flickered, and for a split second, I saw something. Fear? Guilt? But it was gone just as quickly as it appeared. She set her fork down and sighed, her shoulders sagging. "Eli, what's going on? What do you mean?" I could feel the blood rushing to my face. I had to keep it together. I couldn't let my emotions take over, not yet. "I don't know," I said, my voice quieter now. I've been feeling like there's something you're hiding from me. Something that doesn't add up. And I need you to tell me the truth." Her eyes widened, and she swallowed hard. The silence that followed was suffocating. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to say something, anything. But all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. She finally spoke, her voice shaking just a little. "Eli, I don't know what you think you know, but I'm not hiding anything from you. Whatever this is, you've got it all wrong." Her words stung, but they didn't match the unease I could see in her eyes. I wasn't sure if she was lying, or if she was just scared. But something about this didn't sit right with me. She wasn't being completely honest. I could feel it. I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. But instead, she stood up and walked out of the room without another word. My mind was racing, my thoughts whirling in every direction. This was just the beginning. There were still so many things I needed to know. But now, I had to decide. How far was I willing to go to uncover the truth? I spent the rest of the night unable to sleep, my mind in a constant whirl. Sarah's words, those simple, calm words, hung in the air like a thick fog. "You've got it all wrong." I could almost hear her voice repeating those words, as if trying to convince not just me, but herself, too. I wanted to believe her. I truly did. But everything in me was telling me that something was terribly wrong. I couldn't let it go. My mind kept replaying every little detail, every word she had spoken, every glance we had shared. There was no way I was imagining this. Something was hiding under the surface, and I had to uncover it. I had already seen enough to know that the truth was more complicated than just a misunderstanding. The next morning, I went about my day like everything was fine. It was a strange kind of game I was playing with myself, pretending that I wasn't unraveling inside. I didn't want Sarah to know how much the conversation from the night before had shaken me. I didn't want to show any signs of doubt. I couldn't give her that power. But I also knew that, deep down, I was no longer sure of anything. Every moment, every interaction with her felt like a performance, a carefully crafted act to keep me from the truth. At work, my focus was shot. I couldn't get the image of her with that man out of my mind. The kiss, the way she touched him, I couldn't forget it. And the more I tried to push it away, the more I realized that I couldn't trust her anymore. It wasn't just about the affair or the betrayal, it was the lies. The secrecy. What had happened to the woman I thought I knew? The woman who promised me forever, the one who had stood beside me through every hardship. How could she turn into someone I didn't recognize? That evening, I came home earlier than usual. I wasn't planning to confront her again, not yet. I wasn't ready. But something in me knew I needed to prepare. The more I thought about it, the more I realized there was no way Sarah would just come clean. Not unless I pushed her. When I stepped inside, the house was eerily quiet. Sarah wasn't in the living room, where I expected her to be. I checked the kitchen, the dining room, And then, finally, the bedroom. I opened the door, and there she was, sitting on the edge of the bed, her back turned to me, facing the window. She looked lost in thought, like she hadn't even heard me enter. "Sarah?" I said, my voice tentative. She didn't move. For a moment, I thought she hadn't heard me, but then she spoke, her voice barely audible. "I've been thinking about everything, Eli. About what you said last night." Her words hit me like a wave. The last thing I had expected was for her to bring it up again so soon. It was as if she was waiting for me to ask the right question. She had been silent all day, and now she was ready to talk. But something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "I've been lying to you, Eli," she said, still not turning to face me. "I've been hiding things, and I can't keep doing it anymore." My breath caught in my throat. This was it, the moment of truth. But my mind wasn't prepared for what came next. "I've been seeing someone else," she confessed, her voice shaking. "I didn't know how to stop, and I don't know how to fix this now." For a second, everything inside me froze. The ground beneath me seemed to vanish. I had suspected it, of course, but hearing her say the words out loud, was like a punch to the gut. "Who?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "Who is it, Sarah?" She finally turned to face me, her eyes filled with tears. "It's Jason," she whispered. "The man from my work. I didn't want it to happen. I didn't mean for it to go this far, but it did. I'm sorry. I am so sorry." Jason. The name hit me like a slap. The same man I had seen in the footage. The one who had kissed her. The one who had been inside our home. A wave of rage and disbelief flooded over me, but I kept it together. I couldn't let myself fall apart. "Not yet. You've been seeing him behind my back?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and hurt. "Yes," she said, choking on her words. "I know it's wrong, but I didn't know how to stop. He was there when I needed someone, and things just spiraled out of control. I never wanted to hurt you, Eli, but I've been lying to you for months." I stood there, frozen, my mind trying to process what she was telling me. She had been seeing Jason for months. In our house. Laughing with him, touching him, betraying me with him, while I went about my life thinking everything was fine. I felt a surge of anger rising in me, but I held it back. I couldn't let her see how much she had shattered me. I needed to know everything, but at that moment, I didn't want to hear any more of her excuses. "Why didn't you tell me, Sarah?" I asked quietly, my voice betraying the pain I was trying to suppress. "Why didn't you just end it with him if you felt guilty?" "I was scared," she whispered, wiping away her tears. "I was scared of losing you, Eli. I didn't want to admit what I had done. I kept hoping it would just go away, but it never did. And now it's too late." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to feel. This was the woman I had spent years building a life with, the woman I trusted above everyone else, and she had been living a lie. "You need to leave," I said, the words slipping out before I even realized I had said them. Her eyes widened in shock, her face crumbling in anguish. "Eli, please." "No," I interrupted, shaking my head. "I need you to leave. I can't do this anymore. Not like this." And with that, everything changed. The life I had known, the trust one had placed in her, it all crumbled before my eyes. The woman I had loved for so long had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. And now, all I could do was watch her walk out the door. But even as she left, I knew this was far from over. The truth had been exposed, but I had no idea where it would lead from here. I couldn't escape it. The damage was done, and the road ahead was filled with uncertainty and pain. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I knew that the hardest part was still to come. The next few days were a blur, like I was walking through fog. I couldn't escape the empty house. It was too quiet. The rooms echoed with the absence of Sarah's laughter, her voice, even the little things, the way she hummed to herself while cooking, or the way she'd leave random notes around the house that always made me smile. Now, the silence felt suffocating. I was alone in the very space that once felt like home, and every corner of it felt like a reminder of the lie I had been living. After Sarah left, I tried to keep myself busy, distract myself from the thoughts that kept spiraling in my head. But it wasn't easy. Every time I looked at the empty side of the bed, I remembered her confession. "I've been seeing someone else." The words played on a loop, each time hitting harder than the last. I kept telling myself that I had made the right decision by asking her to leave, but doubt crept in when the house felt too quiet, too empty. It had been 3 days since the confrontation, and I hadn't heard from Sarah. No calls, no texts, nothing. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or angry that she wasn't trying to reach out. Part of me wanted her to come back and explain herself, to apologize, but another part of me knew that nothing she could say would change what had happened. The anger inside me was growing, building up with each passing hour. The part of me that wanted to scream at her, to confront her with everything I had learned, kept pushing against the part of me that was still holding onto the memories of the woman I had loved. But the truth was undeniable. Sarah had lied. She had betrayed me in ways I couldn't even fully comprehend yet. I couldn't get the image of her with Jason out of my head. I kept replaying the moment I had seen them in the kitchen, the way they touched each other, the way her eyes lit up when she was with him. It was as if she had been living a second life, one I didn't know about. That life had been right in front of me the whole time, and I hadn't seen it until it was too late. It wasn't just the affair that was destroying me. It was everything that came with it. The lies, the secrecy, the betrayal. How had I been so blind? How had I allowed myself to believe that our life together was real? Now, it all felt like an illusion. A carefully constructed facade that had come crashing down in an instant. I spent most of that week pacing around the house, trying to decide what to do next. I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want to hear her explanations or her apologies. But something deep inside me told me I wasn't done yet. I needed closure. I needed to understand why. I couldn't just let it go without knowing what had driven her to this point. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take the silence any longer, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. "Eli, we need to talk." I stared at the screen, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend like I didn't care, but another part of me, maybe the part that still wanted answers, was desperate to know what she had to say. I sat there for a few minutes, my finger hovering over the keyboard. I knew that whatever she said, it wouldn't change anything. But I couldn't help myself. I needed to hear it from her. So I replied, "I'm listening." The reply came quickly, almost too quickly. "Can we meet? I don't want to do this over text." I thought about it for a moment, then reluctantly agreed. If there was any chance of getting some sort of closure, I had to hear her out. But I wasn't sure if I was prepared for what she might say. We agreed to meet at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. I arrived first, sitting in a quiet corner, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what I expected. A tearful apology? An explanation? What was there to explain anyway? The betrayal was clear. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something more was coming. Something I wasn't ready for. As I sat there, waiting for her to arrive, my thoughts kept drifting back to Jason. What was he to her? A fling? A lover? Was he the one she truly wanted? And where did I fit into all of this? When she finally walked through the door, my breath caught in my throat. She looked different, smaller somehow, like the weight of everything had taken its toll on her. She wasn't wearing the same confident, put-together expression I was used to. Instead, her face was drawn, tired, like she hadn't been sleeping. She spotted me across the room and walked over, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in days. I couldn't read her expression. Was it regret? Guilt? Or something else entirely? I couldn't tell. She sat down across from me and sighed, rubbing her forehead. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy, thick with the words neither of us was willing to say. Finally, she broke it. "Eli, I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make up for what I've done," she said quietly, her voice raw. "But I need you to know something. It wasn't just about Jason. It wasn't just about the affair." My heart skipped a beat. What was she talking about? I thought I knew everything. But now she was telling me there was more? "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked down at her hands, and for the first time in days, she seemed vulnerable. "I've been feeling lost for a while now, Eli. I felt like I was living for everyone else except myself. I thought I could find something to fill that emptiness, but I was wrong. I never meant to hurt you. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself, and I don't know how to get back." I could feel my emotions warring inside me. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to accuse her of lying again, of hiding even more than she had already admitted. But another part of me, strangely, felt sympathy. She wasn't giving me excuses. She was giving me a piece of the truth, and it was one I hadn't expected. But I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. Not after everything that had happened. "Sarah," I began, my voice calm but filled with pain. "You say you were lost. But you weren't lost to me. You were lost to yourself. And that's where everything fell apart. I didn't just lose you. I lost the woman I thought I knew. She looked up at me, tears now streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Eli. I never meant for it to end this way. I never wanted to hurt you. The pain in her voice was undeniable, but the damage had been done. The trust we had built was shattered, and I wasn't sure how, if, things could ever be repaired. And so, we sat there in silence, both of us wrestling with the enormity of what had happened. The quiet between us was no longer comforting. It was suffocating. The weight of our past, of what we had been and what we could never be again, hung in the air like a thick fog. I didn't know what the future held for us, or if there even was a future for us anymore. But for the first time since everything began, I felt like I was seeing her clearly. And the truth was, I wasn't sure if I could ever look at her the same way again. The days that followed that meeting were like a slow unraveling. After Sarah's confession at the cafe, I found myself walking around in a daze, as if the world had shifted under my feet, leaving me with nothing solid to stand on. I had heard her words, seen the tears in her eyes, but even now, I couldn't tell if I had truly processed what she had said. It wasn't just the affair with Jason that had shaken me. It was everything else she had revealed about herself, about how she felt lost, disconnected, and how, for whatever reason, she had chosen that path. I had never imagined her in that light. The woman I had built my life with had seemed so confident, so sure of who she was. But now, it was as though she had shattered into pieces I couldn't put back together. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about us, about the things I hadn't known. Every interaction we had ever had, every moment, every decision seemed to have been clouded by a lie, by something she hadn't told me. I kept telling myself I couldn't blame myself for not seeing it sooner, but the guilt crept in anyway. How had I missed all the signs? The late nights at work, the distance in her voice, the way she had started pulling away over the last few months. I should have known. I should have been more attentive. But now, I was left picking up the pieces of a life that no longer made sense. That evening, I found myself at the same cafe, the one where Sarah and I had met days before. It wasn't intentional, but as I walked past it, I felt a pull. I needed to think, to process everything. And somehow, being here again, in this neutral space, made the most sense. I sat down at a corner table, the same one where we had shared an uncomfortable silence just a few days ago. I stared at the empty cup in front of me, unable to focus on anything but the thoughts swirling in my head. Mind if I join you? The voice made me jump, and I looked up to see a figure standing before me. It was Jason. Of course it was him. I wasn't sure what to do, whether to stand up, to run, or to confront him right then and there. My heart was hammering in my chest, and the blood rushed to my face. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't planned on seeing him, let alone speaking with him. But here he was, standing right in front of me. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, but I didn't want to react without knowing why he was here. Jason took the seat across from me without waiting for an invitation. His casual demeanor contrasted with the storm building inside of me. He sat back, studying me with an expression that was a mix of arrogance and curiosity. His gaze held no fear, no hesitation. He seemed perfectly comfortable, like he had every right to be sitting here. "I assume you know who I am," he said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, almost too calm. I swallowed hard, trying to maintain control. "Yeah, I know who you are. You're the man who's been lying to my face for months, the man who's been in my home while I was out there, working, thinking everything was fine." Jason didn't flinch. Instead, he nodded slowly, as though he had been expecting this reaction. "Look, I'm not here to fight with you, Eli. I just wanted to talk." I let out a bitter laugh. "Talk? What's there to talk about? You've already done enough damage." "I know I've messed up," Jason replied, his voice dropping slightly. "But I want to be honest with you. Sarah's not the only one who's been struggling. I know what this looks like, and I know how it sounds. But it wasn't supposed to happen this way." His words were infuriating, but there was something in his tone that kept me from lashing out. Maybe it was the sense of realization that I needed to hear him out, to understand what had driven them both to do this. Was it really just an affair? Was it really that simple? "You think that matters?" I asked, my voice low but steady. "You think that makes any difference to me? You and Sarah, what you did, doesn't just break trust. It's the destruction of everything we had. So don't tell me about your struggles. I've been left with the wreckage of it all." Jason's expression softened, and he leaned forward slightly. "Look, I get it. I really do. But the thing is, You're not the only one who's been in the dark here, Eli. Sarah hasn't told you everything. She hasn't told you why any of this happened in the first place. I froze. What was he talking about? Had Sarah kept more from me than she had already confessed? The pieces of the puzzle that I had been trying to fit together suddenly seemed more complex. I had thought that I understood the situation, but now I wasn't so sure. What do you mean? I asked, my voice thick with skepticism. She told me everything. She admitted to the affair. What more is there? Jason hesitated, as though weighing his next words carefully. There's more to her than you know. More to why she's been distant, why she turned to me in the first place. But you need to understand something, Eli. Sarah didn't fall into this because she wanted to hurt you. She did it because she felt like she was losing herself. She was caught in a storm of things she couldn't control. I shook my head, not fully understanding where he was going with this. What are you talking about? Are you trying to justify what happened? Jason held up his hand, as if asking me to hear him out. I'm not trying to justify anything, but you need to understand that Sarah wasn't just looking for someone else. She was looking for herself, and she didn't know how to find that without losing everything in the process. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. I didn't know what to believe. Sarah had made her choices, and no explanation could undo the damage. But now, here was Jason, telling me there was more to the story. Could I really trust him? Was he just trying to cover his own tracks? Or was there some truth to what he was saying? You're telling me this now? I asked, incredulous. After everything? Why didn't you tell me before? Why didn't Sarah come clean with me? Jason leaned back in his chair, looking resigned. Because Sarah didn't know how to explain it. She's ashamed, Eli. And in some ways, she's still ashamed of what she did. But she didn't know where else to turn. She was lost. And that's the truth. I stared at him for a long time, letting his words sink in. I didn't know if I was ready to believe him, or if I ever would be. But there was one thing I knew for sure. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There was so much more to uncover, and I wasn't sure how much of it I wanted to face. But for the first time in days, I felt like I was finally getting a glimpse into the truth. And now, it was up to me to decide how I was going to handle it. The weeks that followed that conversation with Jason felt like a journey through a thick fog, but one that slowly began to clear. The truth had come in layers, each revelation adding a little more light to the darkness. The affair, Sarah's guilt, the struggle she had kept hidden from me. Everything had been harder to process than I had imagined. But the more I allowed myself to understand, the more I realized that the story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about pain, confusion, and two people, Sarah and I, losing themselves in the rush of life without even realizing it. After that day at the cafe, I spent a lot of time thinking. I needed space, but I also needed clarity. Sarah and I hadn't spoken much after she left the house, but I knew that if there was any chance for us, we had to rebuild from the ground up. We couldn't just erase everything that had happened, but maybe, just maybe, we could start again. Not in the same way we had before, but in a way that was honest, raw, and real. I reached out to her one evening, asking if she'd be willing to meet. There were no expectations, just a conversation. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I knew that I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. Sarah agreed, and we met at a park, where we sat on a bench under the fading light of a setting sun. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Eli, Sarah said, her voice quieter than I remembered. About everything, about us. I nodded. So have I. There was an awkward silence between us, but this time, it didn't feel as suffocating. It felt honest. Sarah had changed since the day she left. I could see it in the way she held herself, the way she spoke. There was no more pretending, no more hiding. She had come to terms with her mistakes, and she was finally ready to face them. I'm sorry, she said softly, looking into my eyes. I know I hurt you, and I know I've broken your trust. I can't undo that, but I want to try to make it right. I want to be better, for myself and for us. I could see the sincerity in her eyes. There was no more evasion, no more excuses. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. I don't know what the future holds, Sarah. I replied, my voice steady. I don't know if we can go back to what we had, but I think we owe it to ourselves to try. Not to fix everything, but to start from here, right now, and see where it takes us. She smiled, a fragile, uncertain smile, but it was real. I'll take that. I'll take whatever chance you're willing to give me. Over time, we began to rebuild. It wasn't easy. There were tough conversations, long nights where we didn't know what we were doing, but we both knew one thing. We were trying. We had stopped pretending. We were finally being honest with each other, not just about the affair, but about everything. The struggles we had kept hidden, the things that had gone unsaid for too long. It wasn't a smooth road, but it was a road that we were walking together. Months later, things began to feel different. The house no longer felt empty, not just because Sarah had returned, but because we had found a new way to be together. We had rediscovered the parts of ourselves that had been lost in the chaos of life. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was something better, a real, honest connection built on understanding, forgiveness, and trust that we were learning to rebuild, one step at a time. And in those small moments, when we laughed together, when we shared quiet dinners, or when we simply sat next to each other without saying a word, I knew that we were heading toward something good. It wouldn't be perfect, and there would still be challenges ahead, but we were facing them together, and that was enough. The future was no longer a daunting unknown. It was a promise we were both willing to keep. And that, in itself, was a kind of redemption.